hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Also, welcome back to the British Literature series. So, in our previous episodes, we have explored the grandeur and moral depth of the Victorian age. Victorian age, which was the time that was marked by realism, order and faith that was in progress. But as the 20th century dawned, something changed. Like from Victorian age, we came to something else, something that is so new. And the world was no longer the same. And literature, it rebelled. So today, we're going to dive into modernism, one of the most transformative movements that has ever happened in the English literary history. Now, let's have a quick introduction to modernism. So, modernism was a literary movement that emerged in the late 19th and early 20th century. So, it was marked by a dramatic break from the Victorian ideals. So, modernist writers, they sought to capture the complexities and chaos of a rapidly changing world. That was the world that was shaped by war, industrialization, and psychological discoveries. So the literature became fragmented, introspective, and experimental. As we have talked in the previous episode of our British literature series about the Victorian literature, where we have learned that Victorian literature focused on moral values, realism, and social order. But in contrast to the Victorian age, modernism rejected this particular tradition and it emphasized on subjectivity, alienation, and disillusionment. So the change in focus was from the outer world to the inner psyche. So what happened in the Victorian literature, whereas the Victorian literature focused on the moral values, realism, and social order, but our modernism, it rejected the tradition and emphasized subjectivity, alienation, and disillusionment. So the change in focus was from the outer world to the inner psyche. So this particular transition reflected a shift from faith in progress to a questioning of all the accepted truth that we have accepted. Now it's time we should understand what was the historical and intellectual context of the modern age or the modernism in particular. So several global events has happened and that has helped to shape the modernist mindset. First, if we talk about the World War I, which happened in 1914 and it continued till 1918. So, World War I led to a sense of despair and loss of faith in humanity because the World War I it was devastating and all the people could experience was loss, trauma, and the disillusionment about the society that they were living in. Now, after World War I comes the industrialization. So the industrialization, it alienated the individuals from nature and from each other. Like everyone sought to progress themselves. No one actually focused on nature. Like they all tried to progress their mindset, progress their thinking, progress their living level, which led to the alienation of individuals from the nature. They drifted away from nature and from each other, like the relationship that one human should have with another, that relationship relationship it suddenly started to drifting away just because of this industrialism. So now thinkers like Sigmund Freud, he introduced the idea of the unconscious mind. Also, Friedrich Nietzsche, he declared that God is dead, which this statement particularly challenges the moral and spiritual beliefs because the World War I, the industrialization, all had shaped the people's mindset like that. Okay, so all of these fade into the modernist sense of fragmentation and confusion. Before delving and looking about all the key writers of the modernism is, as of now we have understood what was the intellectual and historical context, what was the modernism all about. Now before delving into the characters, the writers, we should know about some of the feature of the modernist literature, because as we are going to face so many modern literature works, modernist literature, we'll see that they have some similar features that is incorporated into the literature of modern age. So let's talk about the stylistic innovation of the modernist literature. Okay, so first comes to our mind whenever we read a modern age work, that is stream of consciousness. What is stream of consciousness? Stream of consciousness is a narrative mode that follows what the character was thinking inside his mind. So, in short, if we say, it is a narrative mode that follows the character's inner thoughts. Now, the modernism was all about the fragmentation. So, fragmented structure was the kind of theme or feature we will mostly come across if you are going to read a modernist work. So, plots that are often non-linear and disjointed, that is only known as the fragmented structure or the fragmentation. Also, there is mythical allusions and symbolism. We are going to find so many mythical allusion and symbolism into the modernized works. So, this mythical allusion and symbolism are frequently used to give structure to the chaos that has been there in the modern age. Also, there is a general rejection of traditional storytelling and objective narration. So the rejection of linear narrative and traditional plot that we are seeing before modern age suddenly vanishes. Okay, so these are some of the key features we need to keep in our mind whenever we are going to talk about the modern age or some modern age works. The features and the themes, they are mostly similar, but some recurring themes that we are going to find in our modernist text, that include alienation and isolation because of the World War I and industrialization, as I said, loss of identity and faith, that was also the result of World War I and industrialization, search for meaning in a meaningless world, and psychological depth and consciousness, the inner consciousness, we can say. So these are some of the themes that reflects the existential anxiety that was there, that was overshadowed in the early 20th century or in our modern age. Now, let's learn about some of the key writers and some of their major works that I have tried to mention, which has influenced the modernist literature. So, first writer we are going to talk about is T.S. Eliot. So, T.S. Eliot is known as one of the most famous modernist literature's writer. So, T.S. Eliot is widely recognized for his contribution to modernism, particularly through his poetry. So, his most famous works that include the Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, The Wasteland, Four Quarters, Murder in the Cathedral. So, these poems, along with others like The Hollow Man, Ash Wednesday, they are considered at the cornerstone of the modernist movements, which explores the themes of fragmentation, spiritual emptiness, and the alienation of the modern life that we already talked about, that these themes and features, we are going to mostly find these themes and features in any modern text. So let's talk about some of his most famous works and some key points about their works. So first, let's talk about The Wasteland, which was published in 1922. So it was considered as a seminal work of modernism, and this poem is characterized by its fragmented structure, allusion to various literary and mythological sources, and exploration of themes like sterility, spiritual emptiness, and the loss of faith. So it's been seen as a very powerful indictment of a society that has lost its way through the happenings of the modern age. Now, the poem The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, which was published in 1915. I have already said, and I always say that please try to remember the publication year of each poem, each work, and try to mostly remember the major writers every work. Now also they are asking questions on the minor writers, but please try at least to cover all the major writers and their all the works and the publication year of their works. Okay, so the poem Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock was often seen to be cited as a landmark of modernism, which showcases the use of stream of consciousness technique and fragmented language and a sense of anxiety and self-consciousness. So it explores the anxieties and indecisiveness of a very modern individual. Okay, just like that, if we'll talk about The Hollow Men, which was published in 1925, this poem was part of Eliot's latter works, which explores the spiritual emptiness and the lack of purpose in the modern world. So it's characterized by its fragmented structure and the imagery of the hollow men who are unable to find their meaning in life. Also, there are other poems like Ash Wednesday, which is published in 1930, which talks about the spiritual renewal and the search of faith in a world that seems to increasingly bland and bleak. Also, we have Murder in the Cathedral. So these are the things, these are the writings we are going to say that had shaped the modernist literature of T.S. Eliot. So you need to at least remember T.S. Eliot's every detail, every minor to major detail, and the publication year of each work, each poem or a text or a criticism. Remember everything related to T.S. Eliot, because majorly questions were seen from T.S. Eliot in every kind of exam. Just like T.S. Eliot, James Joyce was also very famous as a modernist writer. So James Joyce's most famous work, which are also very key examples of modernist literature, include Ulysses, A Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man, Finnegan's Wake. So, but Ulysses in particular, if we say, is considered as a seminal work of modernist fiction. So this Ulysses was published in 1922, and this is a novel which was renowned for its experimental use of language, including stream of consciousness narration, its exploration of the inner lives of its character. It is also very used to incorporate for literary references and parodies. So Ulysses is one of the most famous seminal work of modernist fiction. Next, if we talk about The Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, which was published in 1916, this is a novel which was a semi-autobiographical, which holds the semi-autobiographical account of the artist's journey to adulthood, and it explores the themes of identity, art, and intellectual revolt. And all of these are hallmarks of the modernist literature. Also, just like that, if we talk about The Finnegan's Wake, which was published in 1939, it was James Joyce's final novel, which was considered his most experimental, and it features a unique style with a combination of language and circular narrative. If we particularly talk about what's there in the work, so it delves into myth, history, and a wide range of human experience, pushing the boundaries of traditional narratives. And after that, Dubliners, which was published in 1914, it was a collection of short stories which offers a very realistic portrayal about the life or of the life in Dublin, which explores the themes of societal alienation and the human condition. So these are some of the most famous works of James Joyce that you definitely need to remember. Now, I think I'm going to talk about the most famous modernist literature writers, that is students' favorite. Why? Because, so we are going to talk about Virginia Woolf now. So Virginia Woolf is renowned for her contribution to modernist literature, particularly for novels like Mrs. Dalloway, To the Lighthouse, Arnaldo. So she also made significant contribution to literary criticism and essays as well, like A Room of One's Own. If we particularly talk about her works, Mrs. Dalloway, which was published in 1925, it uses a stream of consciousness narrative technique to explore explore the thoughts and feelings of Clarissa Dalloway, who was the protagonist of the novel, and other characters throughout a single story in London. Just like that, To the Lighthouse, which was published in 1927, talks about or shows the exploration of time, memory, and the human condition, with a focus on the Ramses family interaction and their journeys. And Arnaldo, which was published in 1928, was an experimental novel presented as a biography which explores the themes of gender, identity, artistic creation through the life of the character Arnaldo, who transitions from male to female, and also other works like The Waves, The Years Between the Acts, her essays, The A Room of One's Own, The Commoner. So these some of the um, some of the most famous works of Virginia Woolf. And why Virginia Woolf is so famous? If someone asks you, then you can answer that she rejected the cultural forms of her Victorian predecessors to experiment, shifting perspective, and eventually to work entirely. If he'll say entirely within the work, within the frame of modernist work. Okay, so these are some of the most famous works of Virginia Woolf that you need to remember. You need to remember that you are going to come across inner consciousness, memory, time, stream of consciousness technique, emphasis on language and imagery whenever you are going to read a Virginia Woolf's work. There are two more writers of modernist literature that I want you to know: Ezra Pound and D.H. Lawrence. So, Ezra Pound and D.H. Lawrence were key figures in the modernist movement, although they approach it in a very different way. If we first talk about Ezra Pound, he was a major force in shaping the modernist movement by advocating for make it new ideology and fostering the careers of other modernists, including D.H. Lawrence. So, D.H. Lawrence, while a significant modernist writer, we can say, also challenged some of the modern movement's core tenets or core themes, particularly regarding its focus on the modern and its neglect of the emotional and physical aspects of human life. So, Ezra Pound was a central figure in the early modernist movement by advocating the make it new ideology, which becomes a cry for the modernists to break free from the traditional literary forms and explore some new ways of expressing to the world. And he has influenced a new generation of modernist writers like T.S. Eliot, William Butler Yeats, James Joyce, Ernest Hemingway. And most famous work of his was his magnum opus that we say, The Cantos, which was an epic poem that explores the history of civilization and human spirit by experimenting with the form and language. Now, D.H. Lawrence, as I already said, he has challenged the modernist theme, the movement's focus on the modern and its detachment from human emotion and natural world. He has also a potential of depiction of sexuality. Like Lawrence is known for his honest and unflinching depiction of sexuality, which made him a leading practitioner of modern fiction. His novels like Sons and Lovers, The Rainbow, The Woman in Love, they explores the themes of love, relationship, and the human psyche, which is often seen through a lens of psychological realism. So both Pound and Lawrence were important figures of the modernist movement, but they approached very differently. Where Pound championed the movement's core tenets, Lawrence, on the other hand, engaged with them by pushing back against some of their limitations. Modernism defined, or we can say modernism redefined what literature could be. It opened the door for postmodernism and influenced writers across the globe. Through chaos, but it sought some new forms of expression and deeper truths that is hidden beneath the surface realities. So, this is the impact of modernism on our literature. So, if we sum up whatever we have learned in this lecture, modernism was a very bold literary rebellion against the old order. It captured the fractured spirit of its time, experimented with form, and gave voice to inner worlds like never before. If you all found this video helpful, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Also, in our next British literature series, which would be the last episode of our British literature series, we are going to talk about the postmodernism. And also, we'll try to take a deep dive into T.S. Eliot's Wasteland. So, you have to stay tuned for that video. Thank you all for watching, and I am going to see you all in a next one.